President Trump announcing yesterday, and by the way, later confirmed by the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, that the United States and Canada have mutually agreed to shut the border to all non-essential travel, which brought the question up to the president. What's essential?
Well, I think essential is medical. We have military working together. We have industry working together. And again, it's not affecting trade. So things like that. But just leisurely, let's go to a restaurant and have dinner, which a lot of people do. They come both ways. They go in both directions. That kind of thing we have ended on a temporary basis.
All right. What does this entail? What are the legalities and so on and the ramifications of this? Jeffrey Gorsky joining us, former senior State Department official under President Barack Obama. He was the chief of legal advisory opinion in the State Department's visa office. We'll get his perspective. The Twitter handle is @BAL_immigration. Jeffrey Gorsky, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you, Tim.
Is there a legal definition of essential, non-essential? Is it case specific?
No, those aren't legal terms, and they're coming up. This is sort of a new use, and it's being broadly applied by the government. There was an announcement just made yesterday by the State Department on their Twitter and Facebook feed that they're going to be suspending all quote routine immigrant and non-immigrant visa appointments, and only allowing visas on for emergency use. But again, there's no definition of what an urgent and emergency visa service would involve.
So who makes the call on that?
That will be made by the actual immigration officer who's making the determination. And in the case of the border, and we haven't seen anything written in terms of the U.S.-Canadian agreement. This is brand new. It's a press release, but there has been no paper published there, so we don't have any legal document now to show us how they're going to interpret this. But presumably it's going to be interpreted by the border official when you arrive at the border from U.S. and Canada.
And if someone comes up and says, I have to go to work, would that be considered essential or not?
Probably would not, and that's I work for Barry Appelman Leiden. It's a corporate immigration law firm, and that's what all our clients are facing, and they're all going to probably face suspension of services.
Jeffrey, is there any precedent for this?
Oh no, there's no precedent for this. And when it came up, when the SARS epidemic came up, it was considered to close the borders, but they decided not to do that because the health officials told us that they wouldn't have a significant impact on health. But this is an unusual virus too. But I'm not aware of anything like this.
I've seen it. Obviously, they're doing a lot of border closing overseas as well. I'm not sure if that was something that was a guidance for here, but it sounds like the world is trying to close itself within itself. On the other hand, there are some people who travel essentially, and I don't know that necessarily we can make the connection that this is going to help, but I guess they're going to do it. And again, this is trade. The president said trade will keep going. How does that happen if the border's closed?
Well, presumably they're going to allow truckers and other people involved exclusively in trade. They'll consider that essential services and allow them in. When the travel bans were instituted, the president signed travel bans on people coming from China, Iran, the European area, including now the UK and Ireland. He banned people coming from those areas from coming, but they exempted, for example, airline crews. And so people who are involved in shipping were allowed to come despite the ban. So that ban didn't affect shipping, and presumably if they impose the new ban in Canada, it would be the same. And there are press reports that they're considering similar bans now on our southern border.
It may seem like a natural assumption, but on the other hand, when people were confused with the original shutdown of the border that the president had instituted, one wonders if you're an American citizen who's north of the border, you will be able to come back into the U.S.?
Yeah, you can't. He has no legal authority to ban U.S. citizens from entering the United States. I mean, that would be exile, and he doesn't have that authority. The authority he's been using principally now for these bans allows him to ban foreigners, non-American citizens and non-green card holders from coming to the United States if it shows that their entry would damage U.S. interest. And that's whole section of the immigration law that actually you can trace back to the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798. That's pretty geeky.
It is, but it's important geekiness. Jeffrey Gorsky, former senior State Department official under President Obama, we're talking about this. This is complicated. I mean, visas are not simple things. You can't just sit down and say, oh, yeah, it's this. It's not a bumper sticker. And the same thing with travel and in crossing borders especially. I mean, how should we be looking at this? Is this something that, is this restrictive? Is this something that would have long-lasting effects or impacts? Talk about this a little bit.
Well, it's going to have huge impacts. It's going to affect. It's going to be one of the principal things that are going to hit the U.S. economy, because the U.S. economy depends extremely heavily on foreign travel and foreign trade. You talked about business visitors. I mean, businesses are dependent on their foreign staff. So the huge hits that the virus is inflicting in the economy now are going to be amplified by these travel bans.
Not necessarily to the United States, but how does it affect Canada?
Well, Canada is exempt. Apparently, Canada seems to be exempting U.S. visitors from the ban. So it's only that's my understanding. And again, we're only dealing with press reports now, because as far as I know, that they haven't. I haven't seen any written legal documents on either country's ban. So it wouldn't affect U.S. citizens, which would be the bulk of the travel to Canada.
Wow. Well, again, an unfolding situation, a developing story, as we call it. Jeffrey Gorsky, I really appreciate you being on. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Tim.
Giving us some guidance on what this closure of the border means coming into the U.S. from Canada, and evidently going into Canada from the U.S. Not quite the same, but we'll be following this closely. Jeffrey Gorsky, former senior State Department official under President Barack Obama, giving us his thoughts, his insight. He's tweeting at BAL_immigration.